So September was a pretty good month for gaming because we got some really big heavy hitters like Mortal Kombat 1, we got Lies of P, and we got Starfield. And I'm not sure that October is going to be quite as jam-packed with heavy hitters as what we got in September, but there's still some pretty good stuff coming down the pike, and that's what today's video is all about, is looking ahead to the month of October at some games that I thought were particularly interesting that are going to be dropping on Steam. Now, as is routine, obviously this is not a comprehensive list of every game that's coming out next month because there would just be a ton of those, but rather I've just whittled this list down to about 6 or 7 different games that I thought looked really appealing and should be dropping in the month of October. So naturally, if there's a game that I did not mention on this list, or there's something that you are super excited for in October, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. But for now, let's just go and kick this list off with a game that I wouldn't necessarily call a heavy hitter, but it's definitely nailing the look of its source material, and that would be Hellboy Web of Wyrd. Or possibly Web of Wyrd, I'm not sure how it's pronounced because I haven't heard anybody say it yet, but yes, Hellboy Web of whatever WYRD means. So this new Hellboy game was a roguelike action brawler that was created in tandem with Dark Horse Comics and Hellboy's creator Mike Mignola. After an agent of the BPRD goes missing, Hellboy is sent to investigate. At a glance, the visuals seem like they're stealing the show here with an extremely vivid presentation that looks like it was just peeled right out of a comic book page. I'm not sure how much I like the idea of the roguelike elements, but from what I've seen of the combat so far, it looks like it'll be pretty entertaining. Aside from basic attacks and combos, both Hellboy and your enemies are protected by Toughness, which serves as a recharging buffer that will temporarily shield you from permanent damage. And after Hellboy takes enough damage, he'll be able to unleash a payback attack to do big damage to surrounding enemies. The different procedural worlds you'll be visiting are accessed through a central hub called the Butterfly House. It's definitely encouraging that they work directly with the creator to make this happen, plus with it being spooky season and all, I'm glad to see a big dose of supernatural mayhem right out of the gate, because I don't think we have a ton of horror games that I've seen coming out this October, so here's hoping that Hellboy can bring some players some spooky vibes on the run up to Halloween when it drops on October 4th. Next up, we have Lords of the Fallen, which is dropping on Friday the 13th. Now, Lords of the Fallen is a direct sequel to 2014's Lords of the Fallen, and is serving as both a reboot and a direct sequel to that game, which is admittedly a little bit confusing. Like Hellboy, it's also played from the third person, but is an action role-playing game rather than a brawler, with a lot more in common with Dark Souls. Specifically the fact that you can expect some really brutal combat, and the ability to either take it on solo or co-op it with a friend. You'll build out your character and choose from one of 9 different character classes, and while I don't know much about Lords of the Fallen's story, from what I've read about its world, I'm definitely intrigued. It's set in an interconnected world that is orders of magnitudes better than the original release, and there are 2 worlds that are sort of layered on top of each other. Axiom is the realm of the living, and Umbral is the realm of the dead. And areas that might be traversable in one might be blocked entirely in the other, which I'm sure will lead to some interesting environmental puzzle solving. Players can use a lantern to access the realm of the dead, and if killed in the world of the living, you'll have to get back there and then ultimately retrieve whatever experience points you lost. It all sounds very familiar if you're a Soulslike fan, and the environments are looking totally top-notch from what I've seen so far, and again, I'm expecting some pretty brutal combat challenges and boss fights from the look of things. There's no word yet on Steam Deck compatibility that I've seen, so we'll have to wait and see how it does when it comes out on October 13th. And next up, turning towards some lighter fare than what you would see in Lords of the Fallen, we've got Sonic Superstars coming on October 17th. I know a lot of Sonic's 2D adventures, and really, I guess 3D adventures for that matter, have been kind of hit or miss, but I'm really hoping for good things from this one. Sonic Team's head, Takashi Iizuka, wanted to modernize Sonic's side-scrolling formula, and really aim to recreate the thrills of the earliest Genesis entries. Although this time with a 2.5D perspective that's not too unlike the classic Sonic segments from Sonic Generations and Sonic Forces. You'll be battling it out with Dr. Eggman, who's hired Fang the Hunter to capture the North Star Island's giant animals so he can build up an army. You can play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy Rose, and each have their own unique abilities, which is great because it also features multiplayer, which I'm sure will be completely chaotic given Sonic's emphasis on speed. And I have to say, the visuals here look absolutely stunning, and if it even gets close to the level of quality we got in Sonic Mania, I'm guessing a lot of Sonic fans will be happy when this one drops in a few weeks. And speaking of 90s throwbacks, this next one is one that I'm very curious about because I never got to play the original one, although I was heavily invested in its source material growing up and constantly watched the cartoon with my dad when I was a kid, and that is Gargoyles coming out on October 19th. Now, by all rights, I suppose it would be easy enough to just emulate the 1995 Genesis original version of Gargoyles, but I'm a sucker for remastered classics, particularly those of the Disney variety. And this one in particular is very exciting to me because, again, I never had a Genesis growing up and I never got around to playing it, even in emulated form, so this is definitely on my radar. It closely follows the plot of the show, and you'll be playing as Goliath as he aims to destroy the Eye of Odin, a corrupted talisman that can transform whoever possesses it. As an action platformer, I'm guessing this one has held up pretty well, and I really like that they're giving you the classic experience with some modern amenities. Things like the ability to switch between graphic styles on a whim, and use save states to curb what, for all I know, is some brutal retro-era difficulty. Although on the graphics front, I'm not so sure how I feel about the visuals on this one, if I'm being honest. Like, they're hardly offensive or anything, but it does look a little bit flat to me somehow. But hey, if it plays well and provides a fun dose of nostalgia for those of us who grew up with the cartoon, then I'll have to give it a shot. Next up is a collection I am very excited about, and that is the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection Volume 1, dropping on October 24th. This collection, for lack of a better term, looks to be completely solid. It contains Metal Gear, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, Metal Gear Solid with the VR and special missions, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, and Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, and I think it also includes the NES version of Metal Gear along with Snake's Revenge, so if my counting's correct, 7 different Metal Gear games comprising the series' main entries until the PS2 era. Which I'm assuming means we'll have a separate collection someday that includes maybe 4 or 5, Portable Ops, Peace Walker, maybe the Acid games from PSP. Honestly, it's kind of hard to say where they'll go from here. And frankly, my Metal Gear Solid knowledge is a little bit hit or miss, as it's a pretty complex series to begin with, and I, like many others, didn't get acquainted with it until Metal Gear Solid on the original PlayStation, and that's exactly why I'm so pumped to have a good chunk of the lineup with this one. Sure, I have other ways of playing all of these through emulation, or actually I do think I have physical copies of most of the games from the Metal Gear series, with the notable exception of the Game Boy Color game. And while it's undeniable that this is going to be a great value, I can't deny that the Kojima fanboy within me is just a little bit irked by the notion that this is going to release without having anything to do with Kojima at all. Which makes sense considering he and Konami parted ways some time ago. But my personal feelings aside, this is an amazing series that is a staple of, if not just the straight-up godfather of the stealth action genre. If you've never played them before, this sure looks to be the best modern way to get a bunch of these classics, and given that these are older titles, I'm expecting they will run just perfectly fine on the Steam Deck. And finally, if you're looking for a first-person parkour cyber ninja simulator, Ghostrunner 2 will be coming out on October 26th. And just like the original, you'll be running, jumping, wall running, and sliding your way through a range of dystopian environments, and it looks to be every bit as thrilling as the original from what we've seen so far. I can't speak at length about the story and premise here because selfishly I don't want to spoil it for myself as I haven't wrapped up the first one on PS5 yet, but knowing that it was well received enough to warrant a sequel and the fact that I could enjoy it at buttery smooth frame rates on the PlayStation 5 and also on the Steam Deck from what I've seen, I don't expect to leave the original on my backlog for too much longer. If you're curious what it's all about, there are demos for both the original Ghostrunner and Ghostrunner 2 on Steam right now, and some of the videos I've looked up, it looks like you can get near 60 FPS in most scenarios when it comes to playing it on the deck. And you'll definitely want that because some of those platforming and action sequences are incredibly tricky, to put it mildly. Thankfully, Ghostrunner is great about getting you back into the action quickly, which is good because otherwise I could definitely see this being an exercise in frustration. But again, if you're looking for a fast-paced cyborg ninja simulator that's just cyberpunk as heck, this should probably be on your radar. And finally, a couple of bonus mentions here because these games will not be releasing on Steam as they are Epic Store exclusives, but you can still access the Epic Store on your Steam Deck if you're willing to jump through a couple of hoops, so I did want to go ahead and mention that yes, Assassin's Creed Mirage is coming out on October 5th, and then also for horror fans, we are getting Alan Wake 2 on October 27th. I will probably pick up at least Alan Wake 2 on the PS5, I would imagine, because that's where I have my original copy of the PS5 Alan Wake Remastered from a couple of years ago. But yeah, it should be available also on the Epic Store, so again, as long as you don't mind loading that onto your Steam Deck, you can play it there too. Alright, and that's it for this one. Again, not a comprehensive list, just some of the games that I thought looked really interesting that were going to be coming out in October. I was really surprised not to see more scary stuff coming out, or maybe I just wasn't looking at the right titles, but yeah. Anyways, I'm still excited for more than a few games that are on this list, but hey, what about you? Are any of the games that are on this list appealing to you, or is there something I just completely neglected to mention that should be on this list? So please let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for your time and taking the time out of your day to watch videos here. It really means a lot to me. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.